Hi, I'm Ruth Akalache, and today we'll be talking about the hidden cost of AI democratization. This would be a critical analysis of environmental sustainability in the AI revolution. Let's jump right into it. The central question here is, when AI becomes as accessible as drag and drop, what are the environmental and social consequences that tech leaders are not discussing with us? So there are three key perspectives. The tech leader's perspective. Suleiman mentions that the AI carbon footprint is minuscule, particularly in renewable data centers. However, this is contradictory to the science. As Istrid et al. State, 40% of the carbon budget has already been consumed by digital device use. But it also brings us to the design ethics perspective. Systems thinking reveals that there are hidden social and environmental costs we're just not discussing when it comes to AI in the status quo. So what exactly is the science stating? What does the data say? The data shows that 40% of the per capita carbon budget allocated to achieving 1.5 degrees Celsius of carbon emissions by 2030 has already been consumed by the average digital content use. 55% of the per capita capacity for mineral and metal resources has been consumed by digital devices already. And 92% of mineral or metal impacts come from device manufacturing, not their operation. There are a few connections that we can draw here. The first one is on the greenwashing contradiction. Suleiman claims that there is minuscule carbon emissions in renewable data centers. However, the science from life cycle assessment reveals that there are hidden costs across the entire supply chain. This matters because it relates directly to the invisibilization of environmental impacts we discussed in Lecture 1. It focuses on operational emissions but ignores the embodied impact. Mining, manufacturing, and e-waste are externalized to the global south, which is a classic example of greenwashing through partial accounting. The second connection is the hardware choke point and resource limitation. Suleiman mentions that GPUs have extremely narrow supply chains, and these are choke points that can be leveraged by regulators to restrict access. The deeper issue here is the science shows that 55% of mineral metal carrying capacity is already consumed. Democratization will mean that we accelerate the mining of rare earth minerals, we increase ecotoxicity. Even if we achieve renewable energy by 2030, mineral use remains critical. This connects to plant obsolescence and the right to repair movement, as discussed in Lecture 2. The third connection here is the democratization paradox. Now, a democratization without context seems like a good thing, but making AI more accessible doesn't reduce its total impact. In fact, according to Jevons paradox, it multiplies its consumption. The promise here is you democratize access of AI to everyone. The reality is that consumption grows faster than efficiency, and which means that total computational burden is going to explode. Now you're going to have a cornucopia paradigm. There is going to be digital abundance, but it doesn't mean that you actually have sustainability. The fourth connection here is to power agency and who exactly is making the decisions for us. Suleiman mentions that governments need deeply technical people at the top. What is, however, missing from the discussion is digital surveillance capitalism, digital imperialism, uneven distribution, and question of balance of power. The article uses equality principle. However, our reality in the status quo is that the people mining cobalt have zero AI benefits, but near environmental costs exceeding their entire carbon budget. So, what unintended consequences would these discussions that we've had so far lead to? We're going to use the tarot cards of technology to explore risks that have already not been discussed in the podcast, lecture, or the article. The first risk is a computational obesity crisis. Mother Nature, the smash hits are the tarot cards used here. The scenario is you have AI that is drag and drop, ubiquitous. What happens is we begin adding AI to everything, not because it's needed, but because we can. The consequence is in 3 to 5 years, you're going to have AI added to every single aspect of your life, whether you need it or not. The problem is that 92% of mineral or metal impacts come from manufacturing. If you have ubiquitous AI, you need to manufacture more devices, which means you're accelerating the e-waste crisis we're already experiencing in the status quo. Now, why does this matter? This matters because though the science suggests that we could double the device lifetime, it is not sustainable. Now, we also know that desktop computers already account for 66% of operational impact despite their less frequent use. With pervasive AI, you're looking at billions of interfaces constantly running. This means that you're going to have a rebound effect. You may get efficiency when it comes to energy use, but because you have increased use, that efficiency is actually being nullified. As Istred et al. Puts it, consumption is growing faster than technology development in terms of efficiency. Now, the second risk we're going to talk about is the cobalt colonialism acceleration. The tarot cards used here are Forgotten and the Big Bad Wolf. The scenario is that Suleiman mentions the environmental factors, but we constantly forget the human cost. GPU demand explosion means that mining in the DRC intensifies. The consequence in a few years is an increase in child labor, ecosystem destruction, health crisis, geopolitical conflicts, and artisanal miners being displaced by industrial operations. Why should we actually think this matters? The forgotten perspective. Whose hands mine the cobalt for AI to become drag and drop? This, in connection to the class concepts that we've discussed so far, bring to the forefront digital imperialism, uneven distribution, ecotoxicity, and in terms of the cards, the forgotten. The issue here is we're constantly violating the equality principle. The article uses the equal per capita share of Earth's carrying capacity. However, cobalt miners see zero benefit of AI while bearing almost all of the environmental degradation costs, and this actually consumes their entire allocated budget. The third risk we're going to talk about is the inference inequality. We're going to use the tarot cards, the Siren and the Catalyst. The scenario is, as AI becomes essential infrastructure, a two-tier society emerges based on computational access, basically a digital caste system of some sort, and the scientific article already shows this disparity. Norway, for example, has used 26% of their carbon budget because they have clean electricity. However, when you move on to India, 61% of the carbon budget has been used because of coal-heavy grids. The risk here is we're risking entrenching systematic disadvantages in the job market, in education, in healthcare, in the creative economy. The article already expunges that 3 billion people remain unconnected, mostly in 4 reliant countries. When they connect, they risk facing higher environmental costs and worse services overall. Now, the risk here is technological paternalism. The Siren card. How exactly does your product respect people's boundaries and other parts of their lives? In what situations might it be inappropriate or distracting? Social norms are changing. People are defined by fear of missing out. There is diminishing autonomy. Success is being defined by computational augmentation. The connection here is digital paternalism or technological paternalism as discussed in Lecture 2. AI providers offer free tiers with usage caps, deciding who gets full computational capacity. Even green AI perpetuates digital inequality. Now, what we're going to discuss next is what can be done. From the article, we could start with effective mitigation. What helps? Rapid decarbonization of the power sector could reduce 12% of carbon budget by 2030. And we could also increase the use of renewable energy for data centers. However, this doesn't solve everything. A holistic approach is needed. We need lifetime extension, circular economy, appropriate computation, and regulatory frameworks. Key takeaways from this presentation. Democratization is not sustainability. Renewables alone are not enough. There are hidden costs that we need to talk about. These are the human costs. Systems thinking is particularly important in this discussion. Now, conclusion. There's a call for wisdom. From Lecture 1, it's important that we foster wisdom, not just technical skills. The question becomes, are we building circumstances for human freedom, sociability and creativity, or for discrimination, control, and environmental collapse? These are the resources that I used for this presentation, and thank you very much for listening to me.